Shalom, everyone, and good evening, and welcome to St. Jude and St. James and our evening Bible study, where we take a look at the text and sort of wrestle with it in context and thus in its Jewish context, trying to leach out some Hebraic insights into the very words of Scripture that give us our foundation to our society, to our family life, and to our own personal faith. My name's Deacon Aaron. I'm the deacon of St. Jude and St. James, both in person, where we meet in Rowley Regis in the Black Country, and I think it's the Black Country, or it's a bit of Birmingham, and here online. So wherever you're joining in from, you're most welcome. It's also the Feast of the Epiphany. Today is Epiphany, and that's the celebration of the appearance or the revelation or the epiphany of Jesus to the Gentiles, to the nations, which was part of his prophetic calling, that he would be the Messiah, not just for Israel, but for everybody else. And then there's the prophetic call that you see in the prophets, that the Gentiles and the kings will come and they'll give glory and honor, worship gold and incense. And that's you see in Isaiah 60. And then played out in Matthew 2. And one of the things that we wrestled with on Sunday when we actually celebrated Epiphany in our churches was that the future of the Gentiles, the future of the nations, is wrapped up in the future and history of Israel. That annoys a lot of people, yes, but it is also scripturally and biblically true. And that's just one of the tensions that we embrace, that God, the God of the universe, chose the Jewish people to be a blessing to the nations. So Epiphany is January the 6th, while Epiphany in the Western calendar, in the Eastern calendar, happens to be Christmas Eve. So to all of our Orthodox friends, Merry Christmas. And if you're following the Julian older calendar, not all Orthodox do. For example, there are some situations where different Orthodox have actually moved to the Western calendar and celebrate Christmas on the 25th. Who might they be, I hear you ask? Well, Ukraine, for one. So you've got the Russian Orthodox celebrating Christmas today, Christmas Eve, and you've got the Ukrainians have celebrated it with the West on the 25th. Either way, Messiah came, and that's joy to the world. As is our tradition, we are going to read the psalm that's appointed for the day, and that is Psalm 72. And then we're going to have a short Bible study after that. Now, Psalm 72, verses 1 to 15, you might notice the little banner that pops up or is above us if you're watching on your iPod. iPhone, then it's white because that's actually the color of the festival. Okay, Epiphany is white, and the next Sunday, the first Sunday of Epiphany, is the celebration of the baptism of Jesus. And so next week's Sunday sermon is going to be interesting because we start asking the questions. What is baptism? Why do you have to get baptized? What's it all about? Where does it come from? Why does Jesus need to get baptized? And because he does in all the Gospels. So that's a interesting story. All right. So the psalm for the day is Psalm 72. It's called a Psalm of Solomon. Now, Solomon is attributed only 2 psalms in the Bible, although he wrote many more than that. How do we know that? Because it actually says in Chronicles that Solomon was wise. He wrote thousands of proverbs and psalms. But we only have 2 that are in our book of Psalms. There are others floating around that are attributed to him. And this one starts, it seems, it's a very messianic psalm, and actually quite poignant for today's celebration of the Epiphany. Solomon says, "Give the king your judgments, O God, and your righteousness to the king's son." So kings rule. Why? Because the Lord rules. God is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and any human king or ruler or president or prime minister, whoever you've got, needs to acknowledge that there's one above them. You're not the ultimate power. And we can see that in our modern day, even just recently, kings can come and kings can go very quickly in the night. So this one is an appeal. Lord, if we have earthly government, can we please have one that has justice and righteousness? Those are attributes that we want for all of our societies. And Father Phil has often reminded us that without righteousness, no one can see God. And so we actually want a society to be righteous. And the best way to get one is to have leaders model it for us. And so, yeah, welcome, guys, that are coming in. It's good to see you. Now we're looking here at the king and the king's son. He will judge your people with righteousness and your poor with justice. The mountains will bring peace to the peoples, and the little hills by righteousness. He'll bring justice to the poor of the people. He'll save the children of the needy, and will break in pieces the oppressor. This is a very messianic idea that the good king, the good shepherd would come. And one of the particular people groups that he's going to take care of is the poor, the lonely, those that are orphans, and those that are often neglected by society. Earthly government often appointed by the enemy and allowed by God. Yes, it's also true. We have some very unjust leadership. And I guess this is probably one of the reasons why when we go into the New Testament, we have Paul often commanding us to pray for our leaders. And you think, well, why would I want to do that? These guys are morons. But actually, we really do want the kingship that's reflected here in the Psalms. And so I'll agree with Paul that we should pray for our leadership. We should pray for all of our leadership, particularly, in my opinion here, the leadership of our churches. We've got to have good leaders, yes, but we also need good leaders of churches to preach the truth. Oh my gosh, the people perish for lack of a vision. So we've got this messianic idea of a good king who's actually going to come and do the things that we can't seem to do. We often have allowed secular society to take the commandment to be generous and to bless the poor and give it to the state, right? And say the state will take care of everybody, right? We'll take all your money and we'll give it all to the poor and everybody will be happy. And we end up not. Rather, let us be inspired by the commandments of the Lord, that to our families, to say, hey, you be generous. God has been generous to us, so let's be generous back, because we're made in his image and we should act like him. We should act like Jesus, and as Paul says in to the Corinthians, imitate me, because I'm imitating the Messiah. Although you haven't seen Jesus and I'm trying to teach you about Jesus, you don't really know what he looks like yet. You want to imitate him, but you can't yet because you haven't got 100% knowledge of him. Imitate me. I've met him. And so because Jesus is imitating the Father. So that's sort of like the line. And so we should be generous because God is generous. And but one of the roles of the king, and here the Messianic king, is he will bring justice to the poor. And he will save the children of the needy, which is going to be excellent. And in verse 8, he will have dominion from sea to sea. I mean, there's his kingship covers the earth, and from the river to the ends of the earth. It's a great little piece of poetry. Those who dwell in the wilderness will bow down before him. Who dwells in the wilderness, I hear you ask? Well, at the time that the Psalms are being compiled, the wilderness is usually the abode of the people who don't want to live in society. So they don't live in the urban areas and they don't live in the rural areas. They're not farmers or nomads or things like that. They're usually the bandits, the people who are running away. Like when King David ran from King Saul, or he wasn't a king yet, but when David ran from King Saul, he ran to the wilderness, and Saul gave chase, but didn't actually catch him. Here, those people who have run away from society, will come and bow down. They'll be accepted back in. So there's a bit of reconciliation, but they're also the bad guys, and his enemies will lick the dust. So there's this idea that at the end of the redemption, it says, all knees will bow and all tongues will confess. That's the good guys and the bad guys. So everybody will acknowledge that Jesus is Lord. Best to probably do it now. The kings of Tarshish and the isles will bring presents. The kings of Sheba and Seba will offer their gifts. Yea, all the kings will bow down before him, and all nations will serve him. And nations, the word here, it means Gentiles, goyim. So you can see that the future, now remember when we're writing this, okay? This is First Temple, this is Israelite kingdom, and usually the Gentiles, the nations that are around them, tend to be enemies. You get kind of, fighting them. We're going to have invasions of Assyria and Babylon. It's all kind of horrible. But the prophetic future that is being declared to the Gentiles is actually, it's wrapped up in the nation of Israel and in Israel's Messiah, the Redeemer. But here you get the idea that kings will come. And this is why this psalm is read on Epiphany, is read when the wise men, the Magi, often called the kings of the East, but they themselves are not kings, they're the magicians. They come and they offer their gifts. They also bow down and worship. And again, it finishes on 15. And he shall live. This is the Redeemer. I like the way it says that he shall live. He won't die. Right? This is probably one of the problems that our disciples wrestled with when Jesus did go to the cross. It's like, no, but we've got so many psalms and prophecies that say Messiah doesn't die, he lives. And there are other little hints that he does, but there is this idea that he will live, and he is living. And so he shall live, and the gold of Sheba will be given to him. This prayer will also be made for him continually. Or as Paul likes to say, pray without ceasing. There is this idea that the king will receive adoration. Every knee will bow, every tongue will confess Jesus is Lord, and daily he shall be praised. Amen to that. So this is a very kingly, princely psalm, and so we thank Solomon for that. And so what I thought we might do, because in the last couple of Bible studies, I was really kind of reflecting on, the readings that were coming up for Sunday, and that helped. It helped me prepare sermons. It helped our community wrestle with the text a little bit more and deeper than you sometimes get from a 20-minute sermon. But for today, here we start Epiphany. Here we start this new season. We're 2026, and as we sit down and look at the year to come, some people, we've come through Christmas and we approach the year with a sense of hope. Whoa, 2026, a sense of awe. What wonderful things are ahead of us. But there will be some of us who do not approach the year with such zest. Some of us will approach the year with a little bit more trepidation. Maybe because we're a little older and wiser, so to speak. We're looking at the world and going, wow, the economies don't look so good in the world. And nations seem to be teetering on the brink of a falling and changing government, or have had their governments removed, or economies seem to be teetering, and we're not 100% sure what's going to happen with all of this. So there can be a little bit of fear and trepidation. And what is the point of everything that we've done in 2025 if 2026 is going to be a bit of a mess? And so I thought, why don't we wrestle with the scriptures that also handle some of these thoughts, that wrestle with, is there meaning? Like, what is happening in the world, and how should we behave? How should we approach? What should be our actions and our response? Should we just sit under a tree and give up? Should we crawl under a rock and surrender, or should we advance the kingdom of heaven? And if so, how? So I thought we would look and wrestle with Ecclesiastes. Not normally the book that most of us leap to. In fact, this book in the Jewish world is read at the festival of Sukkot. So I know that last year when Sukkot came about, we actually wrestled a little bit with some of the themes that were in Ecclesiastes, particularly I think was it chapter 8 and 9. But so let's have a little look at Ecclesiastes. Now, I'm not 100% sure how far we'll get through the text, but we can certainly wrestle with some of the themes that are there, and see as we also then ponder the new year. And so if you've logged on, I've seen some comments there. Write comments and thoughts and things. I won't be able to get to them all, but that it just partakes and shares with the community. And this is, one of those valuable things that we have with the online space is we are a community, we are a family, and we are trying to support each other and encourage each other. And so, yeah, your involvement and participation is valued and appreciated. It also really helps to know that I'm not here by myself. Sometimes you sit down and you look at your computer and you go, I wonder who else is actually here. Now, I know the Lord is here, which is a good thing, and that would be enough, should it not? But it's also nice to know that there's a wider group of brothers and sisters as well. So, Ecclesiastes. Now, this is called Kohelet in Hebrew. I'll explain a little bit why in a bit later. This is one of 3 books that almost didn't make it into the canon. What is the canon? I hear you ask. The canon is sort of like I'm not your boys up. Okay, great guys. Okay, and whoever's cooking dinner, I hope it's delicious. The canon is the sort of benchmark for trying to figure out which books are in and which books are out of the scriptures. Which scriptures should we read that are valuable for us, and which ones we go, no, I'm not 100% sure we should actually touch that one. And we live 2,000 years or 2,026 years after Mashiach and after Messiah, and you go, we've already got a canon. I can pick up any one of my Bibles. There's the list. It's brilliant. But that wasn't always the case, and it certainly wasn't the case at the time of Jesus. So none of the disciples had access to any of the stuff that we have right now. So we're actually quite privileged. So as time is advancing post ascension, as the church is expanding, the Jewish people are wrestling also with the scriptures, trying to figure out which books are in, which books are out. So the Jewish people have got obviously just the Hebrew canon, and the Gentiles, the Christians, are running around with way more books trying to figure out which ones are in. They're having discussions even with each other. For the Jewish world, hundreds of years go past, right? When the canon that we know today doesn't just appear in the 1st century; it's 4th century, right? It's the Council of Nicaea, and so the scriptures actually were large and smaller as you go through church history. It's a fascinating topic. But for the Jewish world, there were 3 books that they were wrestling with. The last 3 books to put in the Bible were this: Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs, and the Wisdom of Ben Sirach, or sometimes known in Latin as Sirach, which is in Septuagint, but it's not, and it's quoted in the New Testament. So we know that people were reading it, and it was very valuable. Okay, so for example, Wisdom of Ben Sirach chapter 2 and James chapter 2 are almost verbatim. Okay, so James is quoting a lot of Sirach. The eventually Wisdom of Ben Sirach was rejected, and so it didn't go into the Bible at all, except for the Greek version, and so it was preserved there. And Song of Songs, they said, oh no, we have to have Shir Shirim, we have to have Song of Songs in the Bible, and everybody went, why? Because it's literally an erotic love poem. But the sages said, no, this is a love story between God and man, and how much he loves us. He loves his people. And so you have to have it in. and so Song of Songs was included, but it is always read allegorically. No one sort of reads Song of Songs and goes, okay, just take it literally. We always read it as an allegorical story between God and man. If not, we will be struck with the same question that the Jewish sages had: is what is an erotic love poem doing in my Bible? Okay, because when Shulamit gets her hands on King Solomon, all kinds of crazy stuff is happening. And so it's actually a book that's the sages will say you really probably shouldn't read this until you're about 30. The first book that Jewish people read, by the way, is Leviticus, and they read it as young as possible because Leviticus is a book on purity, and you want to be as pure as possible, not as corrupted by the world. So they always let that one be read by children, and not a bad idea, actually. Great book. But Kohelet, they wrestled with that one. Why? Because it seems to be antithetical to the rest of Scripture. You've got this supposedly incredibly wise person whose conclusion is everything is futile. It's just all futility. Life's a mess. And you go, oh my gosh, yeah, why would we want to put that rubbish in the text? But they do. And so I think it's a great it's a great reflection that the Jewish people and ourselves, but remember that's the foundation of our faith, the Judeo-Christian tradition, is you've got these Jewish sages before Jesus are wrestling with the truth of the world. I know in my brain what should be the biblical pattern. Love God, God will bless you, and everybody will be okay. But then we look at the world and we go, even people who love God are not okay. And even though God's in control, things are still a mess. What's going on? So the book of Kohelet reflects reality, and it doesn't hide it. It's one of the things I really also appreciate about Bible. Bible does not hide the sins and faults of its heroes. Okay, it's not like Greek literature where they're all perfect. This is, it says these guys have flaws, so look at how God uses them. These people are weak, so look who's strong. These people have struggles, and look who gets them through. And so books like Ecclesiastes are actually really valuable especially to look into the new year. So I hope that's okay with you guys. And so if not, just tell me in the chat. No, actually, we really want to study Galatians or something. But so the another thing about Ecclesiastes is that it's going to end with of some very famous lines, and you know them already. Fear God, keep His commandments. I've thought about everything, and after 12 chapters, this is what I come to. But it's going to start asking all kinds of questions, and we can find ourselves in those questions, and perhaps see. Let's see a little bit of the wisdom of heaven as it actually looks at the world and acknowledges that not all things are well, even though we know the end of the story. They eventually get that way, but we got to get through what appears to be the apocalypse first. All right, so and also Kohelet, even though it's a Jewish text, it speaks to the world. It's not just saying this is only things Jews do. Okay, it's actually a universal text, and what you find in the Psalms and what you find in wisdom literature. What's wisdom literature, I hear you ask? That's a genre. Like a gospel's a genre, sacred history is a genre, things like that. Epistles are genres. You sort of read them in different ways. But wisdom literature is things like Proverbs, Song of Songs, Job, Ecclesiastes, Wisdom of Ben Sirah. There's these other texts that are called wisdom literature, and they try and make sense of the world, but they also are universal in application. What do I mean by that? Not universal in terms of all gods are the same, because they're not, and all roads lead to Rome because they don't. It's that salvation is applied to all people equally. rather of regardless of age, sex, or race. That is, when in the Psalms it says, "The Lord is my salvation," it doesn't matter whether you're Gentile or Jewish. The Lord is your salvation. Does that make sense? Is that when God says, "I'm going to bring my righteousness," not says, "I'm going to bring my righteousness to Israel and everybody else dies." No, I bring my righteousness to the world. And that's why in Jewish prayers to this day, they always start with this: Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, the Lord our God, King of the universe. Not the King of Israel. I mean, he is, but he's also the King of the universe. He's everybody's Lord, and so you see that also applied here too. So it's a story that applies to all of us. All right, so it's let's have a look. We often assume, and I use that word assume, that this is written by Solomon. Now, why do we say that? Because of the first verse, okay. But there's other verses which may cause us to question that idea. We don't 100% know, but let's have a look. I'm going to read from a New King James, but every now and again I'm going to jump to what's called the Net Bible. What's the Net Bible, I hear you ask? It's a version of the text that came out. Actually, it's sort of kind of been around online for a very long time. Net being internet, and it was a discussion. It was a Bible that was put on the internet, and scholars could come in and make comments about it. And they could debate with each other, argue with each other over Greek, over Hebrew, over syntax, that kind of stuff. So it really was a great resource for non-Hebrew, non-Greek scholars to go, that's what people are wrestling about in those words. So every now and again I'll jump and I'll appeal to that because it'll help me in some of the obscure Hebrew words. And there are words in Hebrew that are obscure. In this, I'm talking about biblical Hebrew. So much so that they have translated the Hebrew Bible into Hebrew. But that's because some Hebrew words just, don't even know what they mean. So you need to have somebody say, well, actually, it means this. Okay. So it starts off in verse 1, and this is in the King James. The words of the preacher, the son of David, the king in Jerusalem. And sometimes it's translated as the words of the teacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. But the word that's being translated teacher or preacher doesn't mean any of those things. The word is Kohelet, which is what they call the book. Ecclesiastes is the Greek version. That's what the Septuagint version called it. Now, why did they call it that? It goes like this. The words of the Kohelet, or in Hebrew, it will read, Divrei Kohelet ben David melech beYerushalayim. The words of Kohelet. Who is Kohelet? Why doesn't it say the words of Solomon? Right, and then just get on with it. The guy says he is the son of David. So who's the son of David? Lots of people. Okay, just about anybody from Judah is called that. So like Joseph is called a son of David, right? And that's why, and Jesus is called a son of David. And so yes, Solomon is a son of David, but David had lots of kids. Not all of them survived, but he had more than one. And he's definitely a king in Jerusalem. So it limits the number of choices we've got. But the word Kohelet comes from the Hebrew word kahal, which is the word for assembly, or a congregation in Hebrew is called a kehilah. And so kehilah, assembly or community, in Greek is an ecclesia, which we then translate into English as church. So it goes kehilah, sort of assembly, ecclesia, which is also an assembly, to church, which is also an assembly. But that's sort of the flow of words. But the phrase kohelet therefore means something like the leader of the assembly or something like that. And strangely enough, it's in feminine form. Okay, Kohelet's female. You go, that's interesting, because you just called him a son of David and a king, not a queen. So the Hebrew's a little bit strange and it's only found here. Okay, this is the only time that this word is used in the Bible. So you go, I wonder who this is. And sometimes they translate it as teacher, although that in Hebrew that's a moreh, or a preacher, which is the guy who's giving a drasha, different words entirely. We're not sure who this Kohelet is. But the Jewish sages, when they make a comment, they say, whoever he is having a serious spiritual struggle. He is engaged in intense spiritual struggle with himself and trying to make sense of the world, which to him no longer makes sense. He thought it had made sense when he was younger, but now that he's lived some life, he's like, no, it's not making sense to me anymore. And so you get this struggle. And so as you go through Kohelet, through the book, there are times where he gets really down, and like verse 2, okay? But there are others where he seems a bit more uplifted. And you're like, interesting. He really is having a little internal battle. And so there's a midrash. What's a midrash, I hear you ask? Well, that's a story that's not true, but it tells the truth. This is the Hebraic understanding. We call those sermons in English. But a midrash is, they have a midrash that says Solomon, as he was going through life and wanting to write down his wisdom, he wrote lots of Proverbs, he wrote a couple of Psalms. Actually, the text says he wrote lots more Psalms. We only have a few. He was beset by a demon. And the demons would whisper in his ear, and they would tempt him, and they would point out, problems in the world, and say, "Oh, you're so wise, Solomon, and God's so in control." Well, what about that? These kinds of things, and they gave the name of the demon Ashmodai. Where'd they come up with that name? I don't know. But it just reflects that in the Jewish world, they had an understanding that there was spiritual warfare going on. Spiritual warfare is not the province of the Pentecostals or the Assemblies of God, okay? And it is has been a long part of the Judeo-Christian tradition, and so there is this understanding that Solomon battled demons. In fact, in Jewish tradition, he beats them. He's like the chief exorcist, and this is picked up by Islam, by the way. Islam has also heard of this tradition that Solomon beats demons, and if you happen to go to Jerusalem and you happen to go to the Temple Mountain, or in Arabic, the Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary, and you're walking around the Dome of the Rock, you will come to it looks like a building that's been all bricked up, and it's called the Well of the Djinn. And that's where, in Islamic theology, this is where Solomon captured the Djinn, or the demons, and he put them all in prison. Why there? I don't know. But it just shows you that the idea or the story or the oral tradition that Solomon is really wrestling with the spiritual world, and he's struggling here. And a lot of it's being reflected in Kohelet, appears in not just in Jewish tradition, also Christian tradition, and then Islamic tradition. I find that stuff interesting. I don't know if you guys do. All right. So the words of the teacher, the words of the Kohelet, the son of David, the king in Jerusalem. And then he comes to vanity, vanity, or meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Everything is vanity. It's all meaningless. In Hebrew, it reads, Havel havelim, amar Kohelet. Haval havelim, hakol hevel. And hevel, what is it? it's translated as everything is meaningless or everything is vain or everything is futile. The word itself is means something is fleeting like vapor or smoke, although it's not the word for smoke. It's fleeting as in just like smoke. You can see it, but it's really hard to grasp. In fact, when you reach out to grab it, it just breaks apart and falls away. And so what you know, it's there, right? You know that there's it's there, but it's a problem. It's something to grasping it is an issue. And so what is the preacher saying, or the teacher is saying, Kohelet is saying? It's like, I've looked at the world, everything seems meaningless. Now, isn't that an interesting thing to say? You can see why people said, oh, I don't want to read this book. Why would I want to read this book? Which shouldn't be in the Bible. What is meaningless? Is everything meaningless? Does everything have no meaning? Why would that be true? And here's why I think a lot of the sages deliberately then said, no, we have to read this text and we have to keep it in its context, and we have to make sure that everybody reads it, keep it in the Bible, is because if you don't have God, if you have no understanding of the world to come, or olam haba, as they say in Hebrew, and you just see the world as this reality, olam hazeh, then everything is meaningless. If there is no God, so here we're largely talking about people who don't believe in God, just believe in the universe or nothing, or whatever. But and if you close your eyes for the very last time and the lights go out and that's it, then everything you've done, everything you've worked for, everything you've hoped for, everything you've dreamed, everything you've lived with, all the people you've lived with, and anybody who's coming after you, they'll disappear. And there truly is nothing. Everything just rushes towards the void. And therefore, it truly is meaningless. Nothing has it. Everything only has value in that moment. The next moment might not exist, and even if it does exist, whatever you're bringing into it doesn't have the same value as it had before. It has something different. And so this is one of the issues that atheists and those who sort of just go with the great force of the spirit of the universe or whatever, will struggle with, because they'll see life and go, but it is meaningless. If there's nothing beyond death, it truly is a vapor. And that's, I think, what the Kohelet is one side of him is asking. That's the demon voice. That's the spirit of the age that whispers into your ears and says, everything's meaningless. There is no God. There is no future. Just go out and do whatever you want. And that type of world is incredibly self-destructive. It doesn't survive. It cannot. And so the world is only made sense by the world to come. The temporal, the physical, is only made sense by the spiritual. And one of the things that we need to acknowledge as we step into this new world is that we as beings, as physical beings, also spiritual beings, we have physical problems, but spiritual problems as well. And if you only want to solve your problems physically without the spiritual, you're in trouble, and sort of kind of vice versa. You need both. And so that is often reflected in the New Testament. Jesus healed people physically. He didn't just walk along and say, hey, I'm the Messiah, and you should keep suffering, and I won't heal you at all, but just know that I'm Jesus. No, he got them both, physically and spiritually. He beat every demon right then and there, etc., etc. And that's the type of way we need to look into this 2020, 2026. So the initial voice we hear from the Kohelet is, look, absolutely everything is futile. But that's not the conclusion. that will come at the end of the book. That's just the thing that he sees. I look at the world and I can't see meaning. And you know what? So much of the world is like that. So much of the world is struggling with each other. You pick up your phone and you just go through the X or whatever social media you were like, and all you can see is people not being nice to each other. I mean, they're ripping each other apart, and they're everybody's got something to say about the world, and it's always usually wrong. Everything's wrong, and nothing seems to be getting better. So this guy, if this is Solomon, then that's 1,000 years pre-Jesus, and we're now, this is 3,000-year-old words. It's almost as though you were, writing it today, and so I guess it is an interesting thing for us to wrestle with. Verse 3: what benefit do people get from all the effort which they expend on earth? Right? Well, what benefit do people get? That's a good question. Okay. If he's reflecting on, can you take anything into the new world with you physically? The answer is, of course, nothing. Right? You can work. It doesn't matter which job you have. It doesn't matter how much money you have in the bank. You will all move into the world to come with none of that. However, if you happen to have a job and you actually earn something and you do work, then what can you do with the rewards of your work? You can bless others. And that's what we also see in St. Paul, do we not? Where Paul says, get a job. Why? So you have something to share. Right? There is this idea that sharing is a good thing. In fact, Jesus will say to us, it is more blessed to give than to receive. Too many of us just want to, I'm not charging anybody here, too many of us in our world want to sit down and go, but what's coming to me? Or in Hebrew, ma magia li, what arrives to me? And that's a really poor way to look at the world. In fact, if that's the only way you look at the world, this is where this futility that's being expressed by the Kohelet here is a good question. What benefit is it to us? Nothing. It doesn't matter what comes to you; you can't keep it, and so it's best to share. A generation comes and a generation goes, and that is true. And but the earth remains the same through the ages. Isn't that interesting? Here we are in our world, and people are worried about the world. Okay, they'll say, well, the world's going to be destroyed. Why? Because we're destroying it. Okay. I'm not 100% sure that that's 100% true. Okay. When you read the scriptures, you read the prophetic future, it doesn't say that man destroys the world. Rather, man destroys man, and God has to come down, and then in the judgment scene, in the apocalypse that comes, it's God that does the judging and the destroying, not us. Okay, we're too busy doing things that are futile. All right. So I'm not one of those doom and gloomers. I think God's in control. You can disagree with me if you like, but I'm gonna rest with this. One generation passes away, another comes. That happens, but the earth remains. Okay, the earth remains. In fact, it says this in Hebrew: Dor holech v'dor ba. Okay, a generation walks, moves, generation comes. V'haaretz le'olam omedet. And the earth just keeps standing forever. Just keeps standing, still there. The sun rises, the sun goes down, and then hastens back to the place. So the Kohelet is sort of sitting back and he's looking at the world, and he goes, you know what? This is what I see. I see sunrises and sunsets. Beautiful. They happen every day. Nothing seems to change. Okay. The wind goes towards the south, turns around and goes to the north. The wind whirls about continually, comes back in on its circuit. Then you've got this cycle going. All the rivers run into the sea, and yet the sea is not full. Always a good one, isn't it? He's like, the hydrological cycle, what an amazing thing, right? Rivers go into the sea, sea never seems to fill up, and they return again. All things are full of labor, man cannot express it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. And that is actually an interesting statement by the Kohelet. So he's discussed what he sees in terms of like the physical realm, and he sees that there seems to be this pattern: day, night, wind, seas, hydrological cycle. People come, people go. They don't seem to have a lasting effect, and they're not satisfied. Like nothing's, what's that song? I can't get no satisfaction. If there is any, it's incredibly fleeting, and that's one of the futility, meaninglessnesses of life. You have a really good dinner, and you go, it was a wonderful dinner. I'm full, and my taste buds are exploding with sensations. It's great, but you'll be hungry the next day. So you got to do it again. Or you watch a movie. That was a great movie. I really enjoyed the couple of hours I spent, with my girlfriend or my wife or my kids, whatever. Great family time. Or you just by yourself. I had a good time. But then you might want to watch another movie tomorrow. Okay? There's this. Is one movie enough? No. Is one meal enough? No. Nothing seems to satisfy. There seems to be an insatiability within the human race, and I think that's one of the things that he was also struggling with. It's like, what is there that we actually can achieve peace with, where people say, you know what, I'm actually happy with what I have, and if I don't have, I'm okay with that. It's something that we all probably struggle with. So it's a good thing to leap into the new year. Where are we at? When our eyes are not satisfied with seeing, you can't see enough, and the ears are never filled with hearing. We can never hear enough, we can never taste enough, we never experience enough. Verse 9 is probably one that a lot of people will remember, definitely at the end of the verse. That which has been is what will be, that which is done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. Ein kol chadash tachat hashemesh. There's nothing new under the sun. So here's the question: is that true? I mean, on one level, you might say, sure. We've every sin that we've done is just an old sin. Every joy that we've had is a joy that somebody else has experienced. Are you sure? And remember, whoever this is, the Kohelet, whether he's Solomon or not, and they're reflecting on the world, there's nothing new under the sun. So on one hand, yeah, when you have a child, or just ourselves, we were all children, we had to learn to walk. We all did. Doesn't matter who you are, male, female, or young, old, rich, poor, black, white. Okay, we all had to go through exactly the same learning experience to walk. And we stood up and we fell down and we did a little walking. And our parents, when they were watching us do that, were filled with joy. Wow, getting to walk. Come on, come to Papa, come to Mama. And you had all those beautiful moments. And at that moment, it was pure joy. And it was new. Happened to lots of other people since time immemorial. So therefore, technically, it wasn't new. But boy, it was new to you. And for all of us, when we were getting out and experiencing and tasting things and learning things new. So on one hand, while there's nothing new under the sun, okay. But that's also not true, because, there's nothing new under the sun, except that the sages note in their comments, except when you study the Bible, you always find something new. There's no time when you will ever have read this book and then you'll sit down and you say, you know what, I get it. I got everything. And so I'm just going to fold it up and put it on the shelf and get on to something else like Harry Potter. Okay? The Bible is one of those books that you spend all your life studying and you're constantly finding new treasures, right? New wine and something new and exciting that speaks to us, and we learn. And so, is it new under heaven? On one hand, no. The book you read forever, yeah, yeah, the book that you read forever. The so so on one hand, no, it's already since time immemorial has been there. In fact, in Jewish tradition, they'll say that the Torah was even written before the creation of the world. Right? God knew exactly what He was going to have in His Bible. But for us, we experience something new. And you know what? Our kids do. Our kids will read the same book that we're reading and find something new and exciting in it, and it'll be fresh and beautiful and be very helpful to them. And so, on one level, yes, Kohelet, yes, Mr. Solomon, there's nothing new under the sun, but that doesn't mean that there isn't anything new to be explored or learnt, and so new experiences that we can have. And so, going into 2026. There might be something new and exciting for us. That's a nice little thought to have for the future. What's going to be new for you and me this year? Obviously, it's going to be different for all of us. We experience time in a very limited linear way. Absolutely, we do. And it's great to learn or to sit down and acknowledge that there are those beings like God, okay, who exists in a different time and space. He enters ours and interacts with us, but he also can see past, present, and future. And we sometimes can't experience it that way. One day, though, it'll be different. Praise the Lord. Okay, so the Kohelet is wrestling with this tension of reality versus the ideal. Where but there's nothing new under the sun. Is there anything that can be said this is new? Well, we just answered that. I mean, on some cases, yes, because of our way that we grasp reality in the world. It has already been in ancient times before us. So here he's, sort of looking at the more temporal meaninglessness of life. This is the bit of the person who doesn't acknowledge God or doesn't acknowledge the world to come and just sort of sits in his own little piece of time and says, I've had a good dinner, and Solomon will go, yeah, but so have millions of other people before you. So that's nothing you do. These kinds of ideas. There is no remembrance of former things. Well, yeah, memory is a funny thing, isn't it? Okay, we often, in our way of thinking, we think of memory as what's in your brain that you can recall. Which, okay, that goes away. It fills up, and then it you can't retain everything, and we get forgetful, as you know, and there's various diseases that we end up encountering, and more so as we seem to get older and depending on the medications, the foods we eat, and blah blah blah, we get into some sort of very forgetful. But in the Jewish world, in the scriptural world, in the Hebraic world, memory is not linked to that cognitive sense. Memory is preserved by doing. What does Jesus say at the Last Supper? Do this to remember me. Not sit around and contemplate and think of it and look at a nice picture, okay, or close your eyes and go, oh yes, Jesus at the Last Supper, what an amazing thing that was. Okay, you physically do it. And in the Bible, there's many passages, especially in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, that God remembers. Right? Genesis chapter 8, the first time it says, and God remembered Noah. That's not that God forgot Noah. That's not possible. It's just that memory then, or the idea of remembering, okay, spurs people into action. There's no remembrance of former things. Okay, so this sort of idea is that we don't learn from the past. We're constantly repeating the same patterns of behavior, right? We lurch from one war to another because we just haven't quite figured out how nations are supposed to relate to each other. Nor there'll be any remembrance of things that are to come. This sort of the idea of doing isn't going to help, says our dear brother Kohelet, by those who will come after. However, that's the sort of scenario that he preaches, or he begins to contemplate. He starts off in a pretty negative way. It's not how he ends the book, though. And depending on how you feel right now, when you're going into 2026, are we feeling like him, going, oh my gosh, I really don't want 2026. I don't want any of it. It's just too big for me. Okay, that might be a real feeling for some of us. But here, the story, or not the moral of the story, the idea is to say this is what actually does give you meaning, is the acknowledgement that there is a world to come, that there is a King of Kings, that God has seen everything in the past, present, and future, etc. So we're going to wrestle with those texts. Verse 12. This is the one where you need to think, I wonder who actually is writing this stuff. Okay, now I know sometimes I've said it's Solomon, and that is the traditional view. Okay, but verse 12 says, I, the Kohelet, the preacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. And that's actually what it says in Hebrew. It says, Ani Kohelet, I'm Kohelet, I'm the person who's writing this thing, I'm the leader of the assembly. Haiti Melech al Israel Yerushalayim. I was the king over Israel in Jerusalem. And so you go, when was Solomon not a king? Like, we know he became king when he was 12, and we know what he was supposed to do when he was 12. Like, the idea of kingship is a scriptural biblical thing. We often say, most of us live in democracies. And most of us will probably say that we like democracy. We might not know why we like democracy, because we might think that we all have because we vote, that seems to be very empowering, except that we often have an election, make a vote, and complain who won. There you go. But the Bible doesn't advocate a democracy. That's a Greek invention. The Deuteronomy 17 says choose a king. So kingship is a very old biblical tradition. But what is the king supposed to do? He's not supposed to be all powerful. He's supposed to be limited, right? He's supposed to be a limited government. And so he's not to have a big army, not to have lots of wives, not to have lots of gold. Solomon messed all that up. But here's what he's supposed to do. In Deuteronomy 17, when the king ascends the throne, he's supposed to write out a copy of the Bible. That's what he's supposed to do. The king gets one command, just one, and it's that this is what you'll do. There are three. These are the things you won't do, but there are one thing that you will do. And you will write your own personal copy of the Bible. That is, on your coronation day, you will sit down with an ink and quill, and the priest will stand behind you. And you'll start writing, in the beginning, God made the heavens and the earth. And the priest will go, yep, you see, you didn't. Right? So to get that through your thick head. And you're okay, I got that through my head. And keep going on into verse 2. Write your own copy. Solomon should know better. Right? He should have written his own copy of the Bible. You've got to remember that he knew God as a young boy. He prayed to the Lord when he got a dream, where God says, what do you want? He says, I want wisdom. And God says, wow, good kid. Paraphrase version. You get that. You get wisdom. You get all the other things, long life, defeat over your enemies, all that kind of stuff. Okay. Okay. Daryl's there going, I maintain that God view, never wanted a king of Israel. Okay, well, you wrestle with Deuteronomy 17. The Solomon should know that he has this that there is a God, and if there is a God and there is a world to come, then things should have meaning. And so, somewhere along the line, the wisdom of our King seems to have forgotten the foundation. That's a good lesson. And that you can see that in our own world too, can't we? We can see civilizations that started, came to be Christian civilizations. Gospel came to nations. Nations began to reflect morality and ethics and things like that. But then abandoned the Lord, got rich, and went wayward, and so you're forgetting the past. And here, Solomon says, people forget the past, and then they keep, the cycle continues. So who exactly is the king in verse 12? I was a king in Jerusalem. Well, I don't know of many kings in the Bible who were kings for a while and then they weren't. Maybe you're reflecting a king that's actually from exile. Now, I'm not saying that that's true, but it could be that this is actually an exilic text. That is, it's written perhaps during the after the Assyrian invasion. Okay. I have one said, but there is a tension between Samuel and Saul, although even though God says, Samuel is talking to the Lord, and God says, hey, I should have been king. Even if David is a king, God is still king. It's not that God says, hey, David's a man after my own heart, but I don't really like him because he's a king. Rather, it's the Deuteronomy 17 is when you get into the land, appoint yourself a king. They don't do it, and that's why you get the trouble in Judges. So it's a nice tension that the text gives us. So verse 12 of Ecclesiastes isn't clear as to who is the Kohelet, other than that's his name. But for want of a better choice of who this might be, let's just say it's Solomon for now and go with tradition. But it might not be. Okay, so verse 13, I set my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all that is done under heaven. This burdensome task God has given to the sons of men, by which they may be exercised. Okay, so he sets his heart to do what? To go out and basically do whatever he wants. Okay, and is that the right thing that he should have done? Okay, nope. All right, I'll just get my notes here on verse 13. So he's reflecting on all the things that he has done, okay, except that, he's done evil. I set my heart to seek and search out wisdom, all that is done, the good and the bad. That means our dear smart person went out and did inappropriate things. Why would he do such a thing? And so perhaps he's not so smart after all. And sometimes is that not a fault that we find ourselves doing? That we sometimes think that in our wisdom, we've actually become foolish. We sometimes self-justify the things that we do. I'm guilty of it. We're all guilty of it. Okay, and here the Kohelet is just as guilty of it, and he admits it. Verse 13, I've set out in my heart to go and do it all. And you're like, I don't think that was a good idea. Because this is not sort of the advice you would give any of your kids, I don't think. Go out and, do everything. No, don't do everything. Have some sense of self-control. In fact, what is one of the fruits of the Spirit? One of the fruits of the Spirit is self-control. So sometimes when I encounter Christians and they say, I'm full of the Spirit and I'm out of control. No. Okay. If you're out of control, that's not good. One of the fruits of the Spirit is self-control. Please, Mr. Solomon or Kohelet, get yourself some self-control. He'll reflect on this later at the end of the book. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and indeed, it's all futile, grasping for the wind. Why? Because what's crooked can't be made straight. What is lacking can't be numbered. Okay, you can't fix everything, which is true. Okay, but does that mean you shouldn't try? Right? And here you've got so many stories to to give encouragement for people to say, look, the task ahead seems so overwhelming. The darkness in front of me seems so deep and black, and I can't see what my little light going to do. But it does have meaning, and this is where you need to have that otherworldly view of the spiritual and the physical together. You know the story of the man walking on the beach, and every now and again he picks up a starfish and he throws it into the sea. There's lots of starfish have been washed up on the shore, and they're all drying out in the sun. And he picks one up and he throws it off into the sea. And as he goes forward, he picks another one up and throws it off into the sea. And then someone comes up after him, whether it's his friend or companion, and says, "Why do you bother? I mean, there's thousands of starfish on the sea. Can't save them all. And, what does it matter?" And as he bends down and picks up one, he goes, "It matters to this one," and throws it into the sea. And yeah, you're absolutely right. What's crooked can't be made straight, but you can make your little bit of the world better. And what is lacking can't be numbered, but you can give somebody something that gives them the lack. Like, what does Jesus say in the sheep and the goats judgment? When I was thirsty, did you give me a cup of water? I might have been thirsty the very next day, but what about now? What about now when I'm thirsty? Can you help me? Yes or no? And so we have to make sure that we're engaged in doing a little bit of what in Hebrew is called tikkun olam, okay, healing the world. And does that mean that you can make everything better? No, but you do your bit. Like, for example, Jesus doesn't say, I'm the resurrection, I'm the life, so you just all sit around and wait for me to come back. No, you go and you share, and you go and you expand the kingdom. But the world is going to go really bad and it's all going to go terrible. Okay, but Jesus did not say wait for that. He said, you go and bring the light to the people that live in darkness right now, and you will make their life better right now. And it might not be all of the universe, but it'll be your little bit. And so what is crooked? Can it be made straight? Okay, on a massive scale, yes, but on a small scale, no. And that's again why there's nothing new under the sun, except that there is. And I communed with my heart, saying, look, I've attained greatness. I've gained more wisdom than all who were before me in Jerusalem. My heart has understood great wisdom. And so again, looks a bit more swinging back to the pendulum. Could be Solomon. I set my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. Why would you do such a thing? That seems to be the antithesis of wisdom. And let's also understand something. Solomon might have been the smartest person on the planet, but he certainly didn't share that wisdom with his kids. Okay? The descendants of Solomon do not do good. Okay? They're not very smart. In fact, after Solomon, you split the kingdom, and it all goes pretty pear-shaped from there. So isn't that interesting that that the wisdom of Solomon, he's the most wisest person. Great. Didn't share it with his kids though, right? And his family life sucked, and so he perceived it as also a grasping for the wind. So we need to make sure that we keep the Kohelet in his place, so that he's wrestling personally. These are things that we get to wrestle with too. We can identify ourselves in him, and perhaps more so than perhaps we might want to admit. But we can also come hopefully to the same conclusions. Because they come to the same conclusions we will see at the end of the text, where the wise man says, okay, I've looked at everything. Fear God, keep his commandments, and in the way that the world will be in a much, you will have a sense of seeing reality in actually the way that it is. And so, all right, we will at our time leave it there. That's a rough reflection of some of the first chapter's issues. Because as you and I are stepping into this new world, or the new year, it's the old world, but the new year, some of us with a sense of joy and hope, some of us with a sense of trepidation, then we are challenged by the secularism of the day, which challenges us, that says that things don't have a meaning, there's just no sense to life, and it's all kind of hopeless. And we step in and we say, actually, no. I know people who have wrestled with this in the text, in the Bible, in the scriptures, and their conclusion is actually that's not true. There is hope to bring. There is light that we can give in dark places. There is meaning in this world. Every action does have an element of healing and does bring a little bit of joy and healing to the world and those around it. You do give water to the thirsty and clothing to the naked, and you do heal the sick and visit those that are in prison, and that will be making your little bit of the world better. So let's wrestle with the same things that Kohelet does. And so, friends, those that have been joining in with the discussion, really appreciate it. Thanks for helping me also wrestle with the new year, because I need just as much joy and enthusiasm as everybody else does. I also need to sit down and say, okay, guys, at St. Jude and St. James, we will go forward and declare Jesus is Lord. There is light to the nations. There is hope. There is a future. There will be righteousness, justice, and peace. That will come. We have good news to give the world. It's a really good thing. Thank you, brothers and sisters, for being part of our journey. So I'll give what's called the deacon's dismissal. One of the functions of a deacon within our community is to dismiss the people. Now, when we have a dismissal, it's not to say, hello, everybody, show's over, although it is. Okay, it's not to say that. It's to say that you are dismissed to go and serve. That's our calling. Now, you and I, we all have callings. We've got something that the Lord wants us to do. We are here for a reason. And that reason, Kohelet is trying to wrestle with. So, brothers and sisters, yes, safe travel in the snow, everyone. Wherever you are, there's a lot of us who've got, we're snowed in. And so keep safe on the roads, keep your family safe on the roads, and keep the strangers whom you don't know who they are, and they need you and they need God. Keep them safe on the roads too. So, brothers and sisters, go in peace, not in fear, not in trepidation, not in futility, not in vanity. Go in peace to love and to serve the Lord in everyone that you meet. In the name of Christ, Amen. All right. Thanks, guys. Happy New Year to everybody. Yeah, or Merry Christmas if you happen to be doing Orthodox stuff. And Father Phil is indeed resting, and so we continue to pray for him. He is still out part of our community. He is our shepherd, and under the Great Shepherd, of course. And so we are looking forward to the time when the Lord brings him back to the community in full health, and that he can do his calling, which is to challenge and to teach and to always preach the truth. All right, guys, blessings. I look forward, if you're around, to wrestle with the next part of Kohelet next week. Be great. Thanks very much, guys. See ya. Bye for now.
Hey, Canon Phil here. Thanks for being with us. If you appreciate the input from St. Jude and St. James, if you appreciate me continuing to speak out, could I ask you, would you support Deacon Aaron and myself as we attempt to procure this church building and pop over to democracy3.org/save a church. That's democracy3.org/save a church. and invest a couple of cups of coffee in us and put 10 quid into the fund. Every blessing, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.